for sure that our country is in a mess. We no longer have a Department of Defense. It needs to be handed over to the likes of your military-industrial complex that runs the United States and the West, where they basically run governments and they run the countries because they've got the financial power. This thing of not having a functional military will definitely land us with Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, and General Dynamics controlling this country, because clearly that's exactly where we're going. We can't have a situation where we've got unoccupied offices being paid to the tune of 108.2 million rands per year. I mean, what are we doing? The fruitless and wasteful expenditure not dealt with by the DOD that constitutes 460 million. What are we saying? SCM-related irregular expenditure, 5.1 billion. I don't want to recite all of the information that you guys have been saying, because then I'll take too long. I would have to agree with, I didn't get your name, my apologies, sir. When you say Denel must be saved, I agree with you 100%. And I think this committee and other committees here in Parliament, including and especially you, Chair, we need to pull up our socks and try and save these departments. We need to save these entities. And I agree again, sir, when you say Denel ought to be our pride and joy. It should be. It very well should be. Denel and Armsco, they should be supplying arms and ammunition to the rest of Africa. Those countries should be owing us for supplying them with arms and ammunition, because we've got the capacity. The capacity is there. We not only be supplying Africa, we should be supplying the rest of the world. And an entity like Denel and an entity like Armsco should be standalone entities that don't require any intervention and any bailout from anyone, because of the money that they should be making, because the capacity is there, the skills are there. I know a lot of people have left with the skills, but I mean, as entities, the kind of entities that they are, they should be able to run. You can see that it's deliberate. All of the sabotage and all of the mismanagement, it comes from somewhere. It's deliberate that they'll say they've got no ability to maintain equipment. The long approval process to sign frequent maintenance contracts with OEMs, that's deliberate. Why is it not signed? I think these are actually questions and issues that we should be raising with the department and not AGSA. We would be out of line if we were to be smacking the team from AGSA. Reduction in the capacity of Armsco dockyard that has led to the entity being unable to adequately fulfill requirements of the SA Navy, which impacts on the availability of vessels. That means we've got no vessels. We've got no vessels. There's a 90% decline in flying hours over the past 10 years. That means those machines are not even moving. We've got a decline of 90% on sea hours. That means there's nothing happening there. And if you look at the coast we have, how long our coastline is, that means we are not defended as a country. If ever we were to find ourselves in trouble with whatever other countries, that means we're literally sitting ducks. We are literally sitting ducks because our police force is not entirely capable. If our military is the same, again, during the unrest period, there's a place where I stay in KZN. The soldiers that were patrolling there, they had no food. They had no ammunition. They literally borrowed from the suppliers of arms and ammunition, those private companies that actually sell arms and ammunition. They borrowed arms and ammunition. They were fed food by residents. And that's our army. The people who were sent to I think it was the DRC not too long ago, they didn't have boots. So I don't know, Chair. I've got a lot to say here, but I think I would be saying it to the wrong people if I were to carry on. So let me hold it there, Chair. Thank you.
Delegation. You know, to a government refusing to listen, the people will always respond with a revolution. This is a process of us trying to say, let us save what's remaining of this country, and also save a situation where it becomes disastrous. And taking from what my colleague has just said, you know, if there's another report or AGs here, I can take the lead and tell you what are the issues in that department without looking at the report. It's the same issues. And I'm asking myself, how do people sit here for 10, 20 years? I've only been here for 3-6 months, and I think I'm getting fed up already. Because we seem to be engaged in a tick box exercise where we know what the problems are, and they are persistent. But we come, we then lament, hey, that is a problem, that is huge, that is disastrous. We go back, another day we come in, we get paid at month end, there's no improvement. Come back the next year, 3 years, 4 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and then we start blaming. Blame apartheid, we've moved from that now. Some commission was established. We blame state capture, and then maybe some years down the line, we'll then blame the Ramaphosa era. We blame everything for me not coming to work today, for an entity not producing a report. We want to blame somebody. We're not saying these things that do not have effects one way or the other, but we're saying people need to do what they are supposed to do, and someone needs to hold them accountable. There's no justification for entities not submitting financials. You know, only a lazy man can accept an excuse of apartheid. So I blame apartheid because I did not come to work today. I did not submit the statements that I was working on for the past financial year. And I fear that we are going to get used to hearing these things. They are going to start shocking us, and then at some point, we're just going to be okay with the fact that, okay, this is the state here. Let's take another department next. So that's the state again. Let's move on to the next one. And we don't need Honorable Plus psychologist here. We need a revolution. We don't need to be mentally trained. And the problem I have is that if we don't take decisions, and what is the framework we need to take decisions? Speedily, because if we keep blaming people in the entities and the boards and the ministers, and it becomes an endless cycle. The question is, what capacity do we have as a committee to make certain recommendations and put time frames to that? If we don't have that capacity, then what becomes our role? If anything, then the government of the day must be able to speed up the process of changing the culture in administration, or we must lay to bear to the people to change the government of the day, because one of the two has to give in. You can't have a situation where perpetually there's no accountability, and the government of the day remains, because we're going to find ourselves in a situation where the records of history list us amongst people who are part of that government, and we're not going to have any space for justifications to the generations that will come that, no, we were there, but we were trying to fight to ensure that the right thing is done. We're just going to be listed as part of it. And I, for one, will not want to register myself with that kind of a history. I do not want to venture into a discussion about the capacity. You know, if I have one question to the AG, I've had this question to SIU, and SIU gave me a response of what is the problem. And SIU said the problem is leadership. We have a leadership problem. I said, well, I accept that, because I think the environment is already overly regulated. So to suggest that as if people do not know, we must suggest systems they must put in place, it's just us bluffing ourselves and trying to comfort ourselves that we are doing some work to try and put in place some systems. Systems are there. You cannot regulate to restore ethical and moral conduct. It's a culture issue. It's the psychology of thinking of people in operating these institutions. So how do we deal with that? Because you can put as many policies at them day by day. Before you know it, they confuse you. They are contradictory themselves. They are frustrating the processes. But if the ethical and the leadership in these institutions is not changed in terms of culture, we're going to find ourselves in the same problem. So there's not much to question. You know, like I say, it's a repetition of quite a lot of things. It's disastrous. And there's going to come a point where people will have to decide upon themselves what they want to do. Because as a government, we cannot really, we are not the final arbiter. These institutions belong to the people, not to even us who are sitting here. So the people must ultimately take the power into their own hands and make a determination of where they want this country to go. For now, our responsibility sitting here is to try and see if we cannot salvage what is remaining and also restore our own integrity, particularly as Africans and black in this particular instance. Because the impression that we continue to perpetrate is that we are incapable of governing a state, which is totally wrong and an offense to ourselves, And there's no accountability. The ministers, these things are brought to the attention of the ministers. They don't do anything with them. The president is aware of these things. Nobody does anything about it. Not that there are no provisions to then align accordingly what these transgressions should amount to. They are, but it's just a laissez-faire kind of an attitude, very disruptive to the future of this country. So regulating is not a solution. If I have one option to you guys again is what is the problem? And I'm not saying that because I don't know it, but I'm saying the recommendations that we make are good. They are very academic. We must put in systems, we must put in that. But what is the real problem? Can't be dealing with over 12 entities. All of them, we can recite them. Lack of consequence management, no management response, no systems, no internal audit functional systems, irregular expenditure, wasteful expenditures, fruitless expenditure, and all of these things are a daily issue in all of them. So we need to confront the issues and lay to bear to the people the reality of this country so that we can salvage the situation where possible. Where not, we leave it in the hands of the people to determine their own fate. Thank you.
Specifically, are we referring to the current minister or one of the previous ministers? Yeah, coming to Denel, with Denel is very, very bad. With Denel is very, very bad. Maybe just two questions. I think you did indicate that the entity can't fund its turnaround strategy due to lack of funds. Because obviously to turn around the situation, you have to use the turnaround strategy. But if you can't fund, if Denel can't fund its strategy, then it's a serious problem. But I just want to understand what is the level of debts currently. Because the government tried to bail out Denel with that 3.4 billion, of which I think they were able to access about 2.4 billion, and 95% of it was used to settle the historical debts and so forth. But since they are all still unable to move even now, so what is the level of debt currently? And the second question is that the other balance that they were unable to access, because I think there's a slide that indicates that they were unable to access about 900 million of the bailout due to the fact that they were unable to meet the bailout conditions. What were those? What are those bailout conditions that makes it difficult for them to be able to access the 900 million that the government has put aside to assist Denel? And the last question, which it may be an unfair question, from what one of you said, that we need to save Denel, and of which I agree with my colleagues that we need to save it. But from the AG perspective, how can we save Denel? It may be an unfair question, but I think I should ask it.
So I'm trying to gather my thoughts, Chair. I'm doing a rating between 1 to 10. So I want to see what is worse between Transnet, Denel, and SAA. And I'm not sure which one falls where. Oh, they're all on 10. Yeah. And we were arguing here, not really arguing with my fellow friend here, Skosan. I'm convinced that Denel was under the Department of Public Enterprise. But if I'm wrong, then I stand to be corrected. And if that's the If that's correct, then we know who was facilitating this proposed, what you call it, privatization. Yeah, may his soul rest in peace. So, Chair, I want to be very short on this one because I'm not going to recite what the AG has told us. By the way, thank you, AG. You, as always, you always do a phenomenal job. So it will be just reciting, Chair. I mean, the AG has told us everything. So everything that could be wrong here is wrong. I don't think that there's anything more that could go wrong with these entities. And it's bad. And Chair, maybe a question to you as well. You know, we received quite a few communications this week. I think at some point I was under the impression that the minister was supposed to be here. Or if that was not correct, maybe do we have that in the program to send when will the minister be here? Because some of these things we need to raise it directly with her. Because another thing that is evident is that even with the recommendations of accountability, they are not being implemented. No one cares. So we then need to ask the question that there's a collapse of entities. There are recommendations for accountability. Now, when those recommendations are not being taken serious upon, then what must happen? So the minister must come and take account of that and stuff. So you called it a jungle, Chair, and I agree. You know, it's a jungle of non-compliance. Yeah. And you can see the mirror. I mean, we've been dealing with these entities. So there is really a connection between entities that have got a high levels of vacancies and a lack of leadership and their collapse. So there's a correlation there. All these entities that come and tell us that there are vacancies in the boards, they are interim, what, they are the ones that give us the most problem, including this one. 62% of SANDF commitments were unfunded, including that deployment to DRC, where we lost 2 soldiers. So we had 2 people that lost lives because of that. There was an Operation Tiba. So how do we deploy our soldiers on an unfunded program? So it's true when these people send us messages, and they tell us they are hungry and all. Our soldiers. No. Then it means this country is at risk. Is at risk that we and I was just doing some search here, Chair. I think we maybe our admin team must actually assist us with this. I saw something that this deployment was done through a Zoom meeting. This resolution to deploy our soldiers to DRC. It was the Operation Tiba. It was approved through a Zoom meeting. I want verification from that. I think our admin team must look into that and give me that confirmation. And there we deployed our people, unfunded, and our soldiers lost lives there because they were struggling. So it's just too much of a mess. Okay, maybe direct questions, Chair, before I move. The Proclamation 18, it's Proclamation R23 of 2020 in connection to the PPEs. So I see the AG team has written off that as resolved because SIU has taken it up. But has those people actually, has the matter been finalized in court? And why are we not naming and shaming those officials? We should be having names so that we can actually see the finality of that. And we are seeing the SIU as well. I think we should put this up to them as well, just to give us an update on that. So that, because the culture of non-compliance is because there's no consequence. So when we start seeing people going to jail, then others who then come in the system will know that this thing we frown upon is not acceptable. And then what is the status now of the leadership of these entities in terms of the vacancies in boards and everything else? How are we standing there? Are we still having vacant posts and all of that? Because that will also contribute going forward. And then, Chair, as Scopa, do we have the powers to recommend that if some of these entities are not being compliant, why do we keep giving them money? Because if we give entities money and they don't spend the money where they're supposed to be spending it, and we keep funding them, so it means we are complicit in wasting state resources. But obviously there will be an outcry to say why they're not funded and all of that. But we fund them and then they don't use the money where they're supposed to use it. Maybe we should get into a point where we're saying that we are not going to fund entities up until they are compliant with what is required. Thank you very much, Chair.
And also hand over some of the questions to the team to respond to. So on the part of the comments, we've noted them, as you have indicated, Chair, so there's nothing further to say. But there was a question that was asked about the root causes for the qualifications at both DOD and DMV, noting that they are recurring. So in summary, Chair, it goes back to the issue of the audit action plans, whereby we're saying that they were either prepared very late or they were not comprehensive enough to respond to the issue. So they didn't go back and identify the real root causes for the issue so that they are able to apply corrective action. And it also links with the accounting officers as leadership to say, did they do enough then in terms of monitoring the effectiveness of those action plans to respond to the issues? So those are some of the root causes that takes us back to those qualifications. Like if you look at assets at DOD, it's been almost every year that we report the same qualification. However, the matter is not sufficiently addressed. So which means that the action plans that were there were not adequate to respond to the issues. So the accounting officer then needs to do more in the current year to ensure that they turn things around. That action plan must not be done just for compliance purposes, that it's actually there to respond adequately to the issues. So that's the main root cause. Of course, coupled with the lack of consequence management, whereby then accountability for such is not there, or there's also no follow-up to ensure that the people that were responsible for submitting accurate financial statements actually account for that. So those are the two key main root causes for the recurring qualifications based on our assessment. The question about cost of employment overpayments that we are highlighting is one of the qualifications. So it's a new qualification that we reported this year on the overpayments. In the main, what caused it is that there were people that have exited the department. So as they leave, they continue to be paid, which then also affects the allowances that we're highlighting. So it's a salary, it's an allowance that continues to be paid after people exit. And in our evaluation, the reason for that, it's in the main because of the legacy systems that DOD is using. So if a person, say, was stationed in Ituja, for instance, and they leave, the process starts with manual. It's a manual process. So certain documentations must be signed at that level, and they must move up until to head office to ensure that that is actually processed within the system. So the manual systems do contribute to the internal control weaknesses that you are noting, which also has an impact on this overpayment. Then moving on to the question about the database at military veterans, whereby we are saying that their report was not consistent with what was planned. So Chairperson, when the department planned for this indicator, they indicated that they want to report on the annual achievement as well as a cumulative achievement. So they want to measure themselves on the number of people that were verified and added onto the database, but also reflect to say, if the number last year was 1,000, we want to also reflect to say how many people have now been verified and are included in the database. So what happened is that when they eventually reported at the end of the year, they only reflected on the annual target to say how many people were verified, but without then also reflecting on the cumulative achievements over the years for that particular indicator around the database. The question around the fruitless and wasteful expenditure emanating from a SARS penalty. So what happened here is that the department procured certain equipment, specialized equipment through their procurement agent Armsco. And when this equipment was supposed to be delivered, it was not delivered to the initial point of entry that was indicated by the department. It was then delivered in another or different point of entry than the one that was indicated initially. So as a result, the department was then, or SARS then imposed a penalty on the department, and that's the amount then that is reflected as fruitless and wasteful expenditure that was paid by the department for changing those